Thanks, dear speakers. Now we're moving to the topic, how to evaluate blockchain companies. So we hope to get some great insights, and please go ahead.
Where's our woman? I mean, now the diversity is 0.
I try to find her.
Oh, she's female. I know. Google it.
Okay, so we'll start. The first question is, can evaluation of a company's white paper, which includes vision, product details, token economics, business model, and so on, be enough to predict success of a blockchain-based company? I'll let you start.
Hello? Oh, okay. That's the magic question, right? So I've looked at several companies, both from an investment perspective as well as there are people actually working on AI to evaluate white papers. And so there's obviously a lot of thought that's going into it. You know, absent, say, the AI, I think it's very important to establish a framework. So either, 5 to 7 questions that you want to ask. And, one of the things are, the evaluation of the team, obviously, past experience. One of the beautiful things about let's say the ICO market is that the traditional Silicon Valley model was very insular. And even I remember the German computer security industry was very insular. Most of the guys that I know in the early tech, they were all very wealthy German kids from wealthy German families. And the same thing in the US with its Stanford, Harvard, UC Berkeley. And I think the ICO gives the world a chance to kind of look for ideas outside of that. So I think it's very important to not get bogged down by saying, okay, this team is not from Harvard or Stanford, so we can't invest in them. So I think it's important to throw out some of the old evaluation metrics and to actually look at the white paper and say, yeah, let's take a gamble on this idea because that's what human progress is all about.
Thank you. Please.
I think you said earlier that many of these projects didn't meet or don't meet standards that have been developed over decades. And I think the more you find stuff like that in the white paper, the more it's worth looking at. Unless you deliberately say, I'm moving into this at a very, very early stage, because if you do other very early stage investments, you don't have much more than an idea, a team, and that's pretty much it. And you can make up your mind of whether there's going to be a market and how well they defined their customer and stuff like that. But I think that's really important to look at what am I expecting to invest, at which stage are we, and then what's in the white paper. I don't think you can just say the white paper is it, because, yeah.
Thank you.
The thing is, again, my perspective, the whole market or most markets investing are Ponzi schemes. Because you're always trying to find a new buyer of your Series A, Series B, Series D, and either you go public and then the retail investors are buying it, or it's going crash like Fab.com, Groupon, Zynga, maybe Snap. You have all these companies which take a huge dump. Uber even took this too at this time because this is going in waves. So a good deck means, hey, I can play the Ponzi scheme a while because they know how to do marketing and they know how to sales and they know how to build a story. And if you're early enough in and you get out at the right moment, you make a fortune with this. However, if you want to have the real companies, the Facebook, the Googles, the technical ones, there's no correlation between a good white paper, good pitch deck, and their success. It's even the opposite. There are wonderful pages. You look at like the first Airbnb pitch deck. I wouldn't have looked at this just from the design. They made a fortune with this, and it's a real business.
They were designers. That's what's amazing.
Yes, and still sucks in the design. So it's a question, what do you want to play? Do you want to play for ICOs, the one which you know it will jump in the price and I sell it within a couple of days or weeks and then I make my money? Or do you think it's a long-term goal and then don't be fooled by marketing and don't be fooled by design?
So I'm gonna take a different tact here. Everyone forgets the history, and if you forget the history, you don't know why you are where you are. The reason these are white papers even exist is because this was originally R&D, crowd-funded R&D. And as someone who's been around, I read the white paper when it came out. I frankly gave away more Bitcoin than I have now because I never took it very seriously because I thought this was an iterative step on a journey, and I didn't really know that that was going to be where the store of value was. But the fact is that white paper, you wrote this big, long white paper in the days of grants in university, and you took it to your university, and they took it to some of the people who gave them money, and they got you money. And your goal was to get as much money as possible, and then you would spend it as slowly as possible because that was your only source of money. You were never going to get any more. And so they took this model to crypto, and that's why we got in this crazy place where you write this long, wordy paper that no one's really going to read except for maybe your economics professor, and then you get a big pile of money, and then we're supposed to spend it very carefully. But in fact, most startup founders don't behave like that at all. They get that money, they buy Lambos, they go on vacations, they throw parties. And so we in Silicon Valley have known this for a long time, which is why we have boards and governance and tranches. And so a phenomenon I'm seeing now. So first off, the only thing I look at in a white paper is, does it exist? And did my analysts read it? That's the test. I'm interested in the team, the idea, the momentum, and actually, to argue your point, their ability to market. Because all this is an ability to market a security and grow that business. And I'm going to say something controversial here. I think 90% of all tokens are securities. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. I think it's going to force the world to normalize the securities infrastructure and regulatory layers. And I think that's very healthy for markets. But I don't read the white paper, but what I do see in the world, and we're telling our companies to do, is to make a light paper, which is basically a deck. So, all good things, they come back around, like heavy metals on its way. I went to a club last night, everyone was wearing fluoro. So, good ideas, they keep coming back. And sometimes the bad ones too.
Thank you. Do you want to add something?
I want to make fun of that because, if you're an engineer and going to all these meetups and a lot of time you have a question, okay, I'm going to be doing ICO next week. I don't have a white paper yet. Do you have any copywriter to help me write it up quickly? And then we're going to publish it and make a fortune. So it only proves that, in a normal business environment, we have a business plan, which is also changes every week, pretty much depends on down the road. And white paper doesn't have even any business indication. It's just an idea that you would like to push forward with some, with hopefully a team. If you have a team, most of the time there is not even a team.
Thank you.
Yeah, this whole notion, I fully agree with where it started is research, crowdfunded, and an early concept idea. And this is where, if you look at, I always say this, there's a movie about how the VC industry came about, and it was when Sequoia, Kleiner Perkins, and so on started. They had a check, they went to some research labs and said, oh, I think you look great. What you're doing is awesome, no idea what you're doing, but I think I have a hunch this is going to be big. And then they gave the check, and it was really on a napkin. And somehow Europe and a lot of other investors lost that touch with what it's like to do high-risk investments into any kind of person with an awesome idea that they believe they can execute. And it's all been KPI and number-driven and so on, especially in Europe. So that's why I'm excited to be in this space. And for instance, our first investment, Herdius, it's a guy who started mining Litecoin and some coins at age 13, posted on Quora stuff, and over the next 5 years came up with how the blockchain should be solved on a private key level without extra layers, and wrote the white paper by himself and so on. And we said, okay, I think you can do this, and this is why we believe you can do this, and it's a super high risk investment, and there's this company building approach to help him get to those next points and fulfill the communication aspects and increasing the value and so on, all the management stuff that comes on top. But that's what I think is the exciting part, to be able for crypto to invest in such people and ideas. And the next phase with institutional money coming into the markets will show if that origin of this world will hold true and continue living, or if we go into back to KPIs. Or it's our job as investors to create funds that have thesis and focus areas to push the things we believe and have the freedom of thesis to invest in certain projects. And I think that's what's cool about the space.
Thank you.
Could I add? So I'm probably the oldest guy here, and I read history a lot. So, for instance, I knew when I came to Germany in the '80s that Germany was it's a highly advanced economy that just had a few bad years. And so I knew long term that I wanted to be here, and it was one of the best decisions I made. If you look at one of the most important white papers in human history, it was Christopher Columbus. The original premise was that Constantinople had fallen to the Ottoman Turks, and the Venetians and the Turks now controlled most of the trades coming in from Asia. So his plan was to bypass their lock and get to India so they could trade. So he ended up in America. So the white paper totally didn't work out. And then if you look at some of the early players, they were all bad actors. The conquistadors, rather than trading, they raped, pillaged, plundered, stole gold. But the end result is we have a modern society. So I think you can use those white papers. And even if they don't turn out, I think the industry will go forward.
To add to this also means that if you're the first mover, you lose. I mean, until he died, he thought he had visited India. Yes, and everyone who bet in his company, they lost the fortune. They lost all the money.
It's actually not true. The Queen did very well.
Exactly.
The biggest investor in that initial shipping ICO did very, very well, and was a global superpower for
the knowledge.
Right.
She gained the knowledge.
Exactly.
Yes.
But you're right. All the other guys, no money.
So we're going to have a panel later about history, but back to the white papers. I would like to add that I am, with no regards to the fact that I do think that analyzing white papers can actually produce thoughts or decisions about a specific company. I'm not arguing with the speakers. I'm just saying that I do think there are points that can be taken from white paper. I would look at it at the other way around, and that's something that we are doing, is we are looking for the negative parts of the white paper, and I'm not even talking about the extreme parts. For example, when we find duplication of content, which is something, it's a sickness in the industry and it has to stop. And whenever I'm speaking, I'm always talking about that. If you are not able to write your own white paper, and by the way, I don't have a problem with what you said about hiring a writer, because a lot of the people cannot write themselves. It's a gift. So I don't have a problem with someone else writing it for you, but not inventing it for you. You need to be the one that dictates what's going to be written, and it's fine if you can't write it in a nice place. Another example is about token economics. People just take all kinds of numbers, just throw them around, and then put them in the white paper. And obviously, like it was mentioned here, most people can't understand it. I'm not a financial person. If I look at token economics at the moment, I need 3 experts to explain to me if this token economics works or will not work. So I have other examples, but I would summarize it as use the white paper to put X's on companies, to avoid companies. It's a good start. And the next question is decentralization a factor that can promote success of a blockchain-based company? In other words, do decentralized companies have a greater success potential when compared to centralized blockchain-based companies? And I think that we will start with you. Yes? Do you think that decentralized companies compared to centralized companies can have more success?
Well, from engineering point of view, probably not. From if you apply some common sense, then it really depends on a case, because I'm not a fan of decentralizing everything and tokenizing everything, and it's you know, we at Neufound, we going through these steps very carefully, and we actually applying common sense on every layer of our product, and try to distinguish if that really makes sense to push this to Ethereum, or it could be done on the rather central way, like, you know. And to answer your question, I mean, like, I would rather, you know, be more specific. If with company X it makes sense, company Z maybe it doesn't make sense. Yeah.
So it's the difference between the companies, and for one company it's suitable, for another not. What do you think?
Seems the most successful companies today are the ones that say they're decentralized, but actually are centralized. No, I think it's a very generalized, and I agree with saying it depends. As long as decentralized does not mean disorganized in any respect, whether it's governance, accounting, trading, rebalancing, giving out tokenomics, hiring, and so on, both have a fairly successful chance in succeeding. And I think it was WordPress or other big companies that were established also in a decentralized HR perspective. I think it all starts at the top of the company with the founders. If they have an authentic way of leading a company and setting it up technologically and so on, it trickles down, and then it's believable and it'll work. If that's not the case and it's forced upon someone or something or a system that's not made for it, it will sooner or later show.
Thank you. What do you think?
Well, I think long term, obviously decentralization is the way to go, but currently because of technological restrictions and limitations, that it's faster to have it centralized. But I think, you know, within the next 4 to 5 years, you'll see technologies emerge that'll enable processing of transactions to be, to be multiplied by factor 10, factor 100. That'll enable the true vision of decentralization to occur.
Thank you. I'll change the question a little bit to add something. I would like to hear what you think about the fact that if we're talking about a decentralized company, do you think it will affect the funding of the company or the success of the company because more people will want to join in because it's decentralized, and because it will make them it will make it more incentivized for them to join in, like the examples mentioned. So everyone loves Wikipedia, for example. Wikipedia, because everyone loves it, because it's controlled by everyone. At least that's what it's supposed to be. So please, go ahead. Yeah, you really want to answer.
Yeah.
It's just that Wikipedia is I love this example because it's actually the perfect example for the blockchain of that actually there's all the extremist positions are actually wrong. So Wikipedia is run by a very well-organized, well-run foundation. There is a tiered system of editors, and I know because I was the victim for a while of malicious editing on my Wikipedia page, which was kind of a funny thing. It was some journalists I'd fired when I was at the Daily Mail. And so there is actually a process in centralization for certain functions, like error correction, like malicious bad actors. But it's decentralized in the way the things that are less than critical or things that should be decentralized are decentralized. And so I think that, like everything, like when we started Razorfish, we'd go around to pitches and people were like, we want to be an e-business. And we were like, okay. But like to us, it was just business, and there's this new channel and you have to use it, and it's going to be bigger than all the other channels, so you should probably pay a lot of attention to it. I would say decentralization is the natural progression of the swing of the pendulum back from one of my former employers, Samsung, who are a multi-billion-dollar company with 300,000 employees, where every decision is made in the tower. Somewhere between is the answer, and it's probably a more select set of views than religious beliefs.
Thank you.
From my perspective, there is no right or wrong. For example, I run all my companies virtual. Yes, I have a handful of companies. All my team, they can sit where they want to, work whenever they want to. I only care about results and never about working time. But I know not everyone can work like this. I had employees who can't live with freedom and liberty. They need a clear hierarchy, clear roadmap, clear guidelines, clear reporting. So at the end, it's how your culture, where you grow up, how your mindset works, and so forth. So I always recommend that businesses and companies form around the core team of people and this culture. So it can be decentralized, it can be centralized. There's no right or wrong. At the end, what counts is the execution. Do you get your idea on the street? Do you do better than your competition, and you're faster than anyone else?
Thank you. You have something to add?
Maybe just a little bit. Personally, to your question, do I believe that there's going to be more money just because? No. I think it really depends on where the benefit is in decentralization. What I personally really like is that now we have the technological means to really discuss decentralization. And I love competition, because every time I see competition, everybody starts working better. You know, and we have so many monopolies in the world with on the internet, with states, with everything. Just to add a little competition is great. So if there's money flowing into that just because they want to support this discussion, great. So I'm one of those.
Right. Not a little competition, a lot.
A lot of competition.
We're up for a lot. Thank you for that. And obviously, if we'll ask our friend Vitalik, for example, then he will say all that centralized should burn in hell. He was talking about exchanges. I'm sure that he was talking about everyone in general.
So anarchists.
Yeah. Next to the next question is, currently most blockchain-based companies are using Ethereum's blockchain to issue tokens that they offer for sale via their ICO-based crowdfunding campaigns. Will this still be the case during the upcoming few years, or can we expect to see other platforms being used for ICOs, as an example, Waves, Neo, Polymath, Harbor, and so on? What do you think?
Well, I think currently Ethereum is the most competitive network. I mean, you know, if we not look at any technological advances, the clear scale is outperform any other network at the moment. And I mean, if you're doing an ICO, obviously you're there to raise money, and to raise money, I mean, do you guys know what's the average ticket for an ICO? Like, if you know, raise your hands. If you don't know, I will tell you. It's 1 Ether. So basically, if you run the campaign, on average, you would get 1 Ether, like on average, from the network. That means your backers will spend roughly 50 seconds on a page, on your ICO page. They will look at the landing page. They will not read the white paper, because in 50 seconds you can't read the white paper. And then if your landing page is appealing and nice looking with some cats probably, you would get 1 Ether back to your wallet. And you need a big mass to raise whatever, a few millions, which Neo or Waves would not give you, at least at the moment. If this change, I hope not, because we are operating on Ethereum network, and I hope it will remain that way. Because if this happens, then I would have to rewrite my stack and spend a few weeks on switching to the other technology. All right.
I think we will fully see some 3-4 major protocols for certain different use cases. There's an ICO being launched on Lisk. There's a bunch of projects running on OneChain that did with OneLabs a tour through Europe recently. There is EOS, of course. All of them setting up their projects. There's Silica with a running mainnet and higher speed for certain things. Funds who will know, we don't know yet how our assets and security tokens will perform and what nature of protocols they need, even because we're still setting them up. Fully believe Ethereum will not be the only thing there. Also, you have the governance aspect and things like my Ether wallet, my crypto. It's basically a homeless tech that's out there. Or you have something with protocols suddenly not working anymore. Or you have IOTA, where there's a constructor mechanism, the part that's not public. And why is it not solved? Maybe because the system is already so big and has so many users and transactions and so on that it's just hard to rewrite it at this point. And maybe, and this might not have any background, but just thinking this further, maybe certain protocols will collapse once they've reached full scale. So I'm not saying this is Ethereum, but I think there's it's a major one right now, and it's done tremendously well, and probably will stay here for one of the big use cases. But I think there will be 3 or 4 more that will persist.
Thank you.
So my favorite quote about Bitcoin or Ethereum is they refer to the US dollar, that if the dollar was a cryptocurrency, it would be a fraud. They print too much, there's no transparency, the debt is way too high. And I think if you look at Bitcoin and Ethereum, they've kind of reached reserve currency status, where it's really hard to dethrone them, even though there's a lot of infrastructure problems. And I really do believe that the underlying technology will enable all those, let's say, dinosaurs like Bitcoin and Ether to actually work well and efficiently in the future.
Thank you. Anyone has anything to add?
I was just going to add that, like, if we're thinking metaphorically, and I promise I won't go wax too long here, Mark Andreessen barely has left his dorm room. And so those of you who are as old as I am, which is I think one of you up here, there was this browser this guy Mark Andreessen wrote in his bedroom called Mosaic at University of Illinois. We actually were using it in my house because I had an internet connection for completely different reasons. And actually, no, I was working for the State Department. But what was interesting is that we had no idea Netflix was going to happen, right? Like, there's no way you could have told me about Netflix, and I would have been like, bullshit. And here's the 50 reasons that's impossible, technologically, business, and I'm wrong, but there's no way to predict that 10 years later. And so where we are with, I think, Ethereum is Mosaic. It's first, it's super interesting. It had a very simple scripting language, i.e. JavaScript, that allowed people to manipulate it without huge technical backgrounds. But it is for sure not the answer and the end-all be-all. Now, does that mean the Mozilla Foundation is gone? No. It's a huge foundation. They make huge contributions to the community of browsers. So I think that we all do this all or nothing thing, which is not right. I agree there'll be multiple protocols. I don't think it's 4. I think it's probably 20 or 30, but you won't use all 30 in one product. And you will choose protocols based on the needs and wants and your jurisdiction.
So adding to this, I think recently I read that 50% of all web pages are by WordPress or in different CMS. So WordPress democratized the internet because everyone could build websites without being a programmer. So we will see the same. What I'm totally missing in crypto world is something for the business guys amongst us who have no coding clue, who don't know Solidity or something else, and who can build their blockchain-based applications, who can do the ICO without coding and everything else. So we need the WordPress for this, and then you will have another 10x on the whole market. And so you will have the nerdy solutions, the technical sophistications, and the very terrible security, good usability, but easy to use applications so that your parents and grandparents can also use the whole products.
Thank you. The next question is, we have seen cryptocurrencies that succeeded mainly due to the strength of their supporting communities during the past few years. For example, Dogecoin reached unprecedented levels of success mainly due to its supporting community, and its market capital reached 1 billion early in 2018. Even though the coin's protocol didn't offer the community anything unique, when compared to other cryptocurrencies, does the community still have the power to take a blockchain-based company to success even when the company and its product have nothing to add to the blockchain continuum? Anyone that wants to answer that?
Everyone who has an iPhone, and I belong to this too, I have this argumentation with Android user quite often that Android is technically better, it's cheaper, so many reasons, and still people buy iPhones. It's community driven, it's brand driven, it's not about the core product, it's about the why.
I couldn't agree more. I just think it's a very, very different game to go from 1 or 10, 100 million to a billion, or from a billion to 10 billion and above. So the higher you go in valuation of an asset, I think it becomes harder for a community to really push it through.